Hey there, welcome back to another video. Today I am going to share a blog post with you from my blog at overthoughtandunderstated.com, and I'll leave the specific address in a link in the description below. This one is about New Age Orthodoxy. The article is called "The Hoax of New Age Orthodoxy." Of course, if you just listen to that phrase, New Age Orthodoxy, it must be a hoax. Orthodoxy means original, unreformed. New Age means pseudo-spiritual, right? But there's a movement of people toward Orthodox Christianity and other denominations of Christianity, especially in the last few years, in which they found consolation from the other hoaxes that were taking place in the West. So anyway, details are right in here. People are quick to adopt a new label with which to identify, but they are not so quick, if at all willing, to adopt a new lifestyle change. Left-brained logic of the West has us convinced that anything that makes sense to the rational mind is simply true, and that the accompanying feelings of understanding is equivalent to a certain degree of enlightenment. This is an appeal to efficiency, because validation of our emotions helps us feel as though we're sane so that we can function in the world. It's a simple error of reasoning, however. What is true may always work when we are able and willing to see the light at the end of the tunnel through the necessary amount of struggle and discomfort. But what works is not always true. For in that case, we are burdened with deciding toward what our efforts might be aimed, and more crucially, judging the worthiness of that goal. It is about that value judgment that efficiency can have no say, besides because that's just how it works. Thus begging the question, which is another logical fallacy, which assumes the claim that one is trying to prove. New Age orthodoxy is one of the latest trending and clearest examples of people's fallacious moves from the secular to the pseudo-spiritual. This is a phenomenon which occurred during the peak of the COVID hoax, in which mostly reasonable yet secular citizens found consolation from the political realm within newly found Christian groups on the internet. Some of them may have had genuinely piqued interest and seeked out actual churches and/or outlets for theological study. But for most, it was an escape from themselves while in isolation, no matter how correct they were about the events they were escaping from, such as the plandemic, the BLM riots, staged school shootings, and everything else in their news feed. The way it worked is that these new converts simply applied their existing left-brain sensibilities to Christian beliefs, tracing what are essentially the same assumptions about existence back to one source. But now, instead of bowing to the authority of the human intellect, such as scientism, they call that source God, Christ, Scripture, divine reason, or the like. And the process of getting there, they call the good kind of faith. They felt very virtuous by making this minor linguistic shift, just like a leftist feels when they change the definitions of words such as racist and sexist to include entire classes and demographics of people that they don't like. They now find comfort being part of a community who has done the same, who simply speaks in a certain way, despite having done no work whatsoever to come to understand reality any more than they did when they held whatever authority they bowed to before as God. They also treat others the same, or worse, only now those others have changed form. They have simply moved from one tribal circle to another, often ostracizing the previous group they identified with, and making no effort to love and coexist with them. For example, scientistic atheists. Okay, that might be the group that these new Christians bastardize because they're materialists, but they don't even understand the philosophy underlying why there's something wrong with that, and also what to do about it, which is often nothing. Evil defeats itself. You don't have to do anything. Where am I? Yes. In fact, they usually become even more hostile in their dispositions toward others, as they simply adopt the values of their new group under the guise of safety. Once safety becomes the reason for outsourcing your authority over yourself, you become weaker and more reactive and violent. Orthodoxy is the particular denomination because of its strict, unreformed adherence to scripture and tradition, to which one's logic must reduce, as stated by internet theologians such as Jay Dyer and their followers, such as Made by Jim Bob. I love Jim Bob's comics, by the way, and I like a lot of Jay Dyer's videos as well. It's just that they're like, they're not enlightened beings any more than anyone else, right? Just because they claim to be Orthodox, right? Yeah, so it's the domination to which one's logic must reduce in search of a coherent Christian framework. So this is where many new Christians tend to land. Perhaps it can be seen as the most reasonable origin for Christian belief, regardless of one's level of devotion to practicing it or not. However, the assumption that Christianity is the way still lies at the foundation of the reasoning, and that cannot be justified by Christianity's own logical standards. It begs the question. So, at the core of this rational position lies a simple error of reasoning. A good theory, belief system, way of life, etc., may only have a case of being fundamentally true if it can account for its own existence through reasoning or otherwise. Love, for example, higher level of consciousness than reasoning. All right, you go to that in order to figure out what to do about your differences of opinion or differences of how to frame the concept of God. Right, and that creates a more conscious and more true existence for all. So this New Age orthodoxy is a human phenomenon like any other, demonstrating our natural tendency to find consolation in community during times of unrest, with the natural consequence of, to some degree, shortcutting true spiritual work. As I often say, life's journey is taken alone, but not every trip must be. True spiritual work primarily happens in isolation, but also alongside others we cross paths with who are roughly in the same place and heading in the same direction. But the work itself is solitary and internal. Each leap to a higher level of consciousness is achieved through one's own volition, consisting of a series of small, nuanced revelations. We join groups, religious or political movements, for example, to escape ourselves. As Carl Jung said, one of the main functions of organized religion is to protect people from a direct experience of God. It is within our deepest selves that we so often subconsciously avoid where we can actually find truth and God most directly. These new Christian converts may be in a slightly better place than they were a few years ago, but are they accessing truth directly as they claim within themselves? No. They're still not even close. Cheers, guys. Have a good day.